Welcome back to the Security Conversations podcast. My guest is Subbu Rama. Subbu is co-founder and CEO of a brand new startup called BalkanID. Let's start right there, Subbu. Can you give me a sense of what is BalkanID? What's the problem space that you guys are addressing?
Yeah, Brian, good to be here, first of all. Uh, we are a modern identity governance company, and we focus on leveraging AI to do intelligent access governance. And what I mean by that is we do two things leveraging AI. One is provide visibility of risky entitlements and entitlement sprawl, and we also leverage AI to automate access review across SaaS and public cloud. So those are the two things we do. So it's an intelligent modern IGA.
Intelligent modern IGA. You use AI very bluntly. In our world, journalism and guys observing cybersecurity industry, marketing has taken AI and put a sheen on it and it's kind of messed it up. Can you contextualize what you mean by AI and talk a little bit about your background in this space? Because you've had an exit prior to this with a company called Bitfusion that was already also dabbling with AI. When you
Yes.
say AI, what exactly are you talking about?
Yeah, what I mean by AI is we leverage data science, and some form of machine learning to really, do two things, right? One is we look at expressed attributes of entitlements and also HR data, and you provide risk of visibility. For example, we tell things like, if a developer has production access to systems, we call that as an outlier. Or if a person has accounts receivable access, they have accounts payable access as well, we call that as an outlier. So we do that, things like that, and that's what we define as risky entitlements, and that's what is the extent of our AI, which is really data science and machine learning. AI is kind of an umbrella word
Right,
for
right.
everything.
And how do you
And
how do you define entitlement sprawl? Because I mean, SaaS has brought all these benefits. Cloud migrations and digital
yes,
transformation has brought all these amazing benefits for SaaS. But it feels like, from interviewing folks like you and interviewing experts in this world, that we are creating attack surfaces faster than we can realistically defend them. And you're fitting into a place here where this entitlement sprawl is starting to become a significant problem for CISOs, especially around visibility and visibility of assets and identities and so on. When you talk about entitlement sprawl, how does that manifest itself? Like, what are you discussing?
yeah. So the primary reason entitlement sprawl has happened is because of the explosion of SaaS, because people have been using SaaS applications these days, and entitlement sprawl is when you don't have a good handle of who has access to what and what level of access do they have. I'll give you some examples. Entitlement sprawls could be identity sprawls. So, for example, let's say if there's an organization with say 1,000 team members, and you have like 2 to 3x more service accounts or bot accounts, that is basically 3,000 accounts. That is basically explosion of usernames and identities. That is identity sprawl. That's a part of entitlement sprawl. Another type of entitlement sprawl is a role or a group or a policy sprawl that you have in applications. For example, the same organization, let's say that have 1,000 team members, and let's say you have 5 applications that they have. Usually organizations have way more SaaS applications, but let's say 5. That might end up with like 5,000 roles or groups. Uh, and that is basically an application sprawl, a role sprawl, or a group sprawl, or a policy sprawl. Do everybody need to have access? Then you get into fine-grained permission sprawl, which is even within the same application, let's say a person has uh, a billing admin right, but let's say they have fine-grained permissions beyond what the role is. That is basically fine-grained application permission sprawl. So you have these different kinds of sprawls. Collectively, all of them are called entitlement sprawl.
When I hear entitlement sprawl, I hear about all these risky apps and identities and so on. It seems to me you're helping CISOs to solve the issue of compliance. How do you segment compliance within the concept of cybersecurity? And from your standpoint, as largely an outsider, you're not traditionally a security guy. I read on your LinkedIn, you build products when you're taking a stab at building a security product. How do you process that in your mind?
Yeah. I'll give you a little bit of background of why I started this company and kind of a little bit of my background. Maybe that'll give a little bit more context
Hmm.
as to why I started solving this problem. So I've been a CTO. I've been a product person, both in large companies as well as small companies. And one of the main things I've seen is uh, most of the time, you as part of compliance, which is really a function of GRC, you have to do access reviews. You have to know who has access to what level of access do you have, all that thing. And usually, companies in the mid market or the companies that I've basically been part of, we end up using spreadsheets and Jira tickets to basically really verify who has access to what. And it's basically a report that you have to provide to your auditors as part of your SOC 2 or as part of your SOX. You just have to provide a report. You need to have evidence of did I give the right access to right people? Did the access get reviewed? Did that access get approved? Usually, all these things happen in a very manual process. You have spreadsheets, you take Jira tickets, you take screenshots of this, and it's a very cumbersome process that happens. And from a point of view of CISOs, when they actually look at compliance, they basically have to spend hours of work, doing this. And when I saw this problem, a few times in my career, and most recently, even after I sold my last company, Bitfusion, I was a CTO at a tax technology company where I saw this problem really explode, and it was countless hours of work that we have to do as a startup. I saw that there's an opportunity to build something, right? Either something to solve compliance. It was a little nebulous, and I kind of teamed up with, my co-founder, Samir. He has been a CISO multiple times. So I kind of brought the technology side of the story, and he basically had the, subject matter expertise in this space. And our third co-founder was Jeremy, who was also an engineering leader at my last company, Bitfusion. I've worked with him as a technologist for multiple years. We kind of actually had like different people looking at it from different angles. So myself looking at it from a product angle, Samir looking at it from a CISO security angle, and Jeremy looking at it from like a technology purist. Okay, how do we build what is possible, what's not possible in a short time? We said, hey, there's an opportunity to build a company around this. Really an IGA company targeting mid market because the opportunity that we saw was the CISOs in large enterprises. They have some legacy solutions that they use, like SailPoint, etc. But the CISOs in the mid market, they just didn't have a solution which fits their price budget. And we saw an opportunity to build an IGA product. That's how we started. And when we started digging in deeper, we saw that, hey, we could automate a lot of this after talking to a lot of different CISOs. And the best way to automate is leveraging intelligence or data science, right? You can basically, for example, let's say if you have 1,000 employees with companies with 1,000 employees, and let's say even five SaaS applications, you're now talking about 5,000 different,
Right.
entitlements to start with. Now, do you really have time to review all of that? That's where AI comes in. Now, why do you have to review all of that? Why don't you basically review only 100 of those, which are really highly risky, the crown
Right.
jewels or the most important things? And that's the opportunity that we saw where how do we basically take AI to kind of speed up and automate this whole entitlement sprawl, but also the access review process. Because access review process was already kind of broken in mid-market companies, right? Even without AI. And when we started actually, seeing, okay, we can actually add AI, we only saw a much bigger opportunity. So that kind of, that's kind of how, how we kind of actually saw this problem and how I saw that compliance, is compliance is a lever or a wedge to kind of enter this thing. But, it's just one of the drivers.
I want to ask a personal question. What
Yes.
attracted you to cybersecurity? Why security? Why not build something in tech doing a lot of I mean, you come from like you're an ex-Intel guy. You could tackle any problem. What's the attraction?
It's a very interesting question, Ryan, right? So this is my third company I'm building. Okay. My first company was a marketing automation company. And that was a company I created right out of coming out of Intel building chips. And there I
Right.
saw an opportunity. This was in 2011. This was when social media was very huge and people were spending a lot of money in marketing. And I saw, okay, hey, there's an opportunity to, help people figure out how do you spend your marketing budget. That was our first company. It was using intelligence to do that. My second company was Bitfusion. It was kind of really providing infrastructure for building AI. This was 2015. Uh,
Two totally different spaces,
it's
like
completely
two
different space.
entirely different spaces.
I just saw an opportunity, right? So I'm a problem solver. So I mean, I come from an engineering background. So I'm a problem solver. I look at a space, I see a problem, I see an opportunity, I dig into it, and I say, okay, this is a problem worth solving, and I just jump into the space. The same thing happened with cybersecurity. Being a technologist, I've always worked with CISOs and security people as my peers, and after Bitfusion. I started seeing and I had time to really explore different areas, and I saw this problem, and I said, "You know what? There is an opportunity right now, especially in the last couple of years with zero trust and everything really exploding, and with all the breaches and everything. I saw that what there is a huge opportunity to disrupt cybersecurity, and when I started digging into the space, I mean, I was interested in two areas, right, Ryan, data security and this problem. And data security, there were a lot of companies already solving that problem. It was also a little bit harder to penetrate. But this problem, I saw this as a very easy opportunity for us to penetrate. The barrier to entry was very less. The legacy
Why?
players,
Why do you describe this? Can pause there and linger there for a second. Can you
yes,
talk a little bit about what the status quo is? Is there like an incumbent or two? I noticed you mentioned
yeah,
SailPoint earlier. Is there an incumbent or two that is just, there's just market share sitting there to be taken? Talk a little
yes.
bit about what the business landscape looks like.
Yeah, yeah. So SailPoint is actually the biggest incumbent, right? So SailPoint, they're just going to go private, right? So
Hmm.
they're making about 390 million, ARR as a company
In the IGA space, right?
in the IGA space,
This
in the
full
IGA
full
space,
stack IGA,
full stack
right?
IGA space, right? So they are the leader, right? They really created the modern IGA as it stands, like probably until now. And previously it was Oracle, right? And then they kind of really disrupted Oracle and kind of penetrated the space really deeply. And and they were built around the time when on-premise was huge. This was about 10 years ago or 8 years ago.
Right.
On-premise was huge. SaaS was not a big thing. Cloud was not a big thing. The opportunity I saw was over the last few years, cloud has really penetrated everywhere. The mid market and even the smaller companies are using the cloud and SaaS. And SailPoint was focused on large enterprises. The
Right.
opportunity that I saw was, hey, there's an opportunity to go and provide a solution to the mid market and the smaller companies, whereas SailPoint and other guys, legacy guys, are focusing on the large enterprises. And that, you know, I saw a big hole in the market. Like people are just using spreadsheets and manual work and no automation. I saw, okay, there's a huge opportunity. The second thing that I saw was if you look at 5 years ago, starting an AI-based IGA company, I don't know if it would have been successful because the AI models were not mature. You're kind of still kind of figuring out, what AI can be used for, or what machine learning can be used for, what deep learning can be used for. Uh, Over the last 4 5 years, and I've seen that during the Bitfusion times because we were building infrastructure and a lot of our customers were building applications for AI. Over the last 4 5 years, the models have matured, and AI as a function or a foundation is solid, I feel. Now it's all about taking the foundation and applying it to different applications. I saw that now you
Can
can actually
can I
take that and apply in IGA, and those are the two things I saw: the mid-market hole and how can AI is matured, and so the timing was very right, to deliver IGA.
Let me ask a stupid question. Is it realistically possible for a startup to do true AI without access to volumes and volumes of data? Because I hear again, I come from a skeptical, I
Yes,
bring a
yes,
skeptical mind to
yes,
this
yes,
conversation, and I
yes,
hear startups all the time talking about
yes.
ML AI and everything they're doing, and they obviously have no access to any sort of data to make the model to even create the modeling and make the modeling works.
Yes.
Is
I'll,
it realistically? Yeah,
yeah,
help process it for me.
yeah. I'll give you some examples, Ryan. Right? I'll give you how we do it, and that'll probably give you a little bit more insight, right? So when we talk about AI, there is basically two kinds of AI, right? One is an expert system based AI, and the other one is like deep learning, which is completely fully automated, like kind of like Tesla style AI. Uh,
Right.
what I'm talking about is an expert system uh, like AI, which is primarily driven by rules engine and simple machine learning to start with. Uh, so that's totally possible. And I'll tell you, like, what we do, right? The very first thing we do is we basically provide risks based on expressed attributes. And what I mean by expressed attributes is, let's say you basically have employees in a company, and then you have entitlements. When you have employees in the company, you have job descriptions of these people, you have job titles, you have their managers, you have a bunch of different data related to the HR information. And then you basically have the entitlements. We basically take the job related information and marry that with the entitlement information, which basically gives you insights about what is privileged, what is not privileged. And we are able to kind of almost do like a peer group analysis and tell you, hey, this developer has production access, but no other developers in the team have production access. And this developer only started 2 weeks ago. Why does he have production access to systems?
Right. Right.
So this is basically totally doable, right? This is not really rocket science. It's just a matter of like how you are going to attack this problem, and that's why I call it expert system based AI.
Right.
In the long run, the vision that I have is we really want to be autopilot, right? We start with expert system based AI to do with express attributes. Then you basically move to more UEBA like AI, which is leveraging behavioral attributes and basically telling, hey, the person has never accessed a software. Why should that person have access to this? Or a person has never accessed the capability. Why should that person have access to this? So that's the second type of AI. The third type is you look at the existing data that the customers basically have. Let's say you have in Slack, maybe a person has access to a channel which has a lot of customer information, and this is a developer, and it's got a lot of PI information. Now that's data classification based AI. So when you actually
Right.
really actually look at this from this angle, this is totally doable, right? This is not like voodoo or any major rocket science thing. And to be honest, even these things were not possible probably 5 years ago because the models were not built. For right now, to do, let's say, the first one, all you really have to do is take this and apply clustering on top of it. And
Right.
voila,
Right.
you basically get interesting data. So that's totally possible. And that's what we are basically right now doing. But as I said, right, in the long run, right, as time progresses, I mean, we are basically less than a year old startup. So I don't want to say that, hey, we have the world's best AI or anything like that. But this is starting, right? A year
It's
from now,
practical and doable.
exactly. A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. I mean, the vision is to basically be the autopilot for IGA, right? Do it in such a way that, IGA just runs on autopilot. I always like to say sometimes, hey, we want to be the Tesla of IGA. Just like how, cars run on autopilot, we want to do the same thing for IGA. But again, it's going to take a few years. We're just starting right now.
How is this deployed?
It's all in the cloud, so it's a completely SaaS offering. It's
Mhm.
subscription based, and it's everything is basically hosted in the cloud. And our onboarding for customers is literally the fastest onboarding has been so far we have done is about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay. You guys have just announced a seed round of what, 5.75 million in
Yes,
seed funding.
yes.
Can you walk me through a little bit about the fundraising process in security? The headlines are crazy. The funding rounds. What used to be a Series A round is now a pre-seed round. What
Yes,
used to be an A, we're seeing 100 million B rounds. We're seeing $4 billion. Like it just seems maddening to me.
yes.
You're also a venture capitalist as well. Can you talk a little bit about what appears to be a funding frenzy
Yes.
and put it into perspective?
Yeah. I think venture capital is a little bit loaded term. I've done angel investments, right, in the past.
Okay.
Although I've paused on all my angel investments once we started BalkanID because I said, okay, I'm going to put all my eggs in my own company.
Right. Right.
uh, so the funding is crazy. It's very easy. In fact, there were a lot of people who actually,
It is really easy, right?
yes, it was, we were able to close our round like pretty much in 2 weeks, right? The majority of the money was raised in 2 weeks. And, people actually still want to give us money, right? We have to say no. Um,
What makes it easy? What makes it easy? Is it because of your background? You have Samir. You mentioned Samir Seth, pharmacy, so at Whole Foods. You have heavyweights
yes.
in your corner. That does make it very much easy. But is it easy across the board? Is it really as it appears
Yes.
that people just get funded very very quickly for
Yeah.
just ideas?
Yeah, so it's actually both, Ryan. One is, yes, we were fortunate that, we've been kind of, we had a great team, so we were able to, pull this together very easily. Uh, the second thing is, yes, anything cybersecurity, it's pretty, insane. And there is a reason, Ryan, right? If you look at cybersecurity and CISOs as a group, this is kind of like being created only the last decade or two, right? The acceleration of number of CISOs has only increased in the last decade. The threat landscape has only increased in the last 2 3 years, especially with COVID. It's only gotten crazy. So because it has happened, I think we are only scratching the surface about 20% of the surface. There is still about 80% there of untapped market potential. That is why you basically hear companies raising crazy rounds, right? And the other day I was hearing a company raising $43 million or $45 million for their seed, right? Very first round. Uh,
Right.
so it's very easy to raise money, by the way, right? But when we actually built this company, we wanted to be a little bit more pedantic about this, right? We wanted to build a business and not a startup. And what I mean by building a business is we wanted to build something that's sustainable. So what we said was, let's not dilute too much of ourselves. Let's raise the right amount of round that we need that is going to basically get us about 2 to 3 years of good runway for us to actually, even if we actually have to take some missteps, it's okay. We'll have good 2 3 years of runway. And let's actually get to a point where we are confident that we can build a $2 3 million business, a true business. Then let's basically go and raise a 20 30 million dollar round and then try to scale it up. So even though even though we actually had opportunities to raise like big, like capital right from the get go. I mean, even 5.75 is actually pretty large, as a seed. But when you see companies raising 20
Right.
$30 million for seed, it's nothing compared to that. But our approach is that, let's actually take what is necessary for us to get to like the next phase of the company, really building a true business. Can we build a $2 3 million business
Right.
that can be sustained? So my thing is, right. Yeah, I mean, cybersecurity is hot because there's 80% of market that's still not there. Like this, it's almost like how
You don't think the time has been defined. You don't think the time has been defined yet.
I don't
You
think so.
still think there's a large dark unexplored area there.
It's almost like how DevOps and IT was about 10 years ago, where everything people just started like throwing money, new companies started coming in, and there are some companies which will succeed, some companies which will fail, right? They'll just die, right? So I think that's where we are right now. Like it's almost like use the word security, and you can be sure to get funded. But again, we wanted to be a little bit more pedantic and said, okay, let's actually do what is the least thing that we need, and let's go and actually build a company and see what we can do, right? I mean, again, we don't know. We have been fortunate that we have a few customers have been using our product. We've had about 200 plus conversations with like CISOs, so we've been a little fortunate. But again, the jury is still out there, right? So in 6 months or a year, I'll tell you, how successful we are.
What does competition look like among your peers though on the startup side? Is there a lot of are there a lot of investors pouring money into this new IGA space trying to replace the spreadsheets for the mid market?
It's funny you actually asked this question, Ryan, right? Uh,
Because you're not the smart you're
no,
not the only
we're not.
smart genius in the
Of
world,
course,
right?
of
I mean,
course.
obviously there's going to be eyeballs
Yes,
here.
yes.
What does the
Yeah, yeah.
landscape
There
look like?
are actually other startups also actually attacking the space in the last year, so which makes it a little hard, which is very interesting for us too. So we are focusing on IGA, as opposed to a lot of companies are focusing on IAM, right? So focusing on permissioning, managing permissions, provisioning, deprovisioning. Like there are some sexy terms like just-in-time provisioning, all these things. Okay,
Right.
uh, so a lot of companies are focusing on that. We are focusing purely on IGA, which is governance aspect of it. We are focusing on how do we basically make sure We tell you what your entitlement sprawl is. We tell you what your identity sprawl is. We tell you what your access sprawl is. We help you govern it by doing access reviews much smarter. We help you generate reports, and we kind of help you close the loop on compliance. So we are kind of focusing purely on a IGA purist as opposed to on the IAM side. So there's a lot of startups and
Right.
companies who are actually focusing on, hey, I'm doing IAM, but I'm also doing IGA. So our this thing is right, by focusing purely on IGA, we feel like we can be the best in IGA.
What has surprised you the most as you immerse yourself in cybersecurity world, coming into cybersecurity for the first time? When you talk to buyers, you talk to CISOs. It seems to me when the experts say, you have to button down these 5, 6 foundational things. Like these are the 5, 6 foundational things you have to do, and we understand the mantra from the security expert. From a CTO coming into security, has there been anything about this industry that has surprised you? Just anything that stands out?
Yeah. In fact, I've been very fortunate, to have had conversations with a lot of CISOs, right? And I almost tell my co-founders that I'm almost becoming a half CISO in many ways.
You're starting to feel like you're really, really immersing yourself
And
into the
I
world,
had to
right?
read a lot of books, by the way, right? I had to read a lot of books. I almost had to really hang out with a lot of folks to really think like the CISOs, compliance people, security engineers, etc. Right? So the thing that has basically, has been a big insight is security people are actually great business people, right? They are not only looking at actually engineering risk or technology risk, but they actually tie the business risk and see how can actually the business be impacted. That was super interesting because coming as a CTO, as an engineer in the past, as a product guy in the past, I've had a lot of respect for engineers or also even CTOs who are very business minded because now you can work backwards and apply the most minimalistic technology to solve the problem. I've seen that CISOs are actually very similar, right? They are actually very business minded, and they really look at what is going to solve the business, problem. So that was a super insightful thing, for me.
Meaning the security emerging as this business enabler rather than not only securing the data and the assets within the organization, but enabling the business to do more amazing things because security is right.
Exactly, right? Because it becomes a business conversation. Like, how do you protect your company? Okay, if you don't protect your company, it's going to affect your revenue because you cannot do all the checkboxes day one, right? You have to do the minimalistic thing that is going to protect your business at this stage. At the next stage, you do the next minimalistic thing, then you move to the next minimalistic thing. So that was basically a
Right.
great insight for me. Okay. The second thing that was an amazing insight for me was IGA is not a day one problem. So IGA is actually a day two problem. The day one problem is you basically have to go and actually secure your perimeter first, get SSO in place, get authentication in place, get your firewalls in place. So that was actually a big, eye-opening for me. I actually did not realize that before coming into the space. After we actually started talking to more and more and more and more folks, we realized, geez, this is actually a day two problem, not a day one problem. So we actually changed
Interesting.
talking to the CISOs in a different way, where we
Change your communication plan about how you're discussing the problem.
exactly right, and also actually talk to the right CISOs. In fact, we actually don't talk to the CISOs who just took a job at a company because they're much bigger fish to fry the first few months.
Right, right. He's not ready yet for it. Yeah, you need to be at a certain. You mentioned mid market, small mid market, but you still need to have a certain level of maturity. You need to have a CISO in place. You need to have some sort of GRC function or framework in.
Exactly. So that was a big, that was a big insight. Although although my insight is that is going to change over time because I truly believe in about 5 years or maybe even sooner. I think every startup, right? I think security is going to be built as not as an afterthought, but it's going to build from the get-go. You know how you basically have a legal document. You start a company, you hire a lawyer, and you say, I'm going to basically incorporate the company and do this. You're going to probably start thinking about compliance from day one. Maybe it'll be part of your tooling that you basically get, just like how you get Slack and how you basically go and get Google. You're just going to say, hey, I'm going to do this also. And you're just going to do it. You don't even know about it. I do think it's going to happen, but
Which makes
it's going to take some time.
Which brings me to another question, and probably we can wrap up with this question. How do you as an entrepreneur in startup land build for this ecosystem you just described, where security has to be baked in, when your competitor is the platform defender, the platform providers themselves, right? Like say Microsoft is emerging as a big time security vendor, doing SOC. Yesterday they announced this big Microsoft experts thing. You can imagine you have to imagine Satya is seeing this TAM just like you're seeing this TAM, and the revenue signs are everywhere. Is there a worry that those guys can flip a switch and get rid of these smaller categories?
Absolutely, right? Absolutely. But I can't do anything about it, right? So the way I look at it is very simple, Ryan, right? Because I've been an executive also. I was at Dell, working for the CIO, and I was basically given a very similar charter, like go and do interesting things, all those things, right? The way I look at it is large companies also have budgets, right? You basically have a product organization, there are product managers. Whatever ideas you have to be like every product manager is actually working like a startup, which means I'm actually not competing with Microsoft or Okta or Google or anybody. I'm probably competing with that small product team, which is actually doing interesting things. So it's all about basically a focus. So the reason we are focusing on IGA is we want to be the best IGA in the world, right? If we want to be the best IGA in the world for our market, right? I'm not going to go after the large enterprises yet. I'll focus on the mid and the smaller companies who are in the cloud. I will focus on my niche. And if I actually do my niche very, very well, then I am not really competing with any of the large companies, because of course it's all going to be on the slide decks. They're going to talk about it, roadmap, etc., etc. But I'm going to do this IGA way better than anybody else, and I have the same chance as them to go and actually conquer a huge market. So that's how I look at it.
Even though they could be an existential risk, the fact that they're so big and they're these slow moving beasts is like you're confident, you have a level of confidence as an innovator and an entrepreneur that you can get this right much faster than they can. And you can build a sustainable business even within the constraints of these guys might be
absolutely. I mean, everybody. I mean, the fact that everybody's talking about it means it's interesting, right? Now I mean, you have to see they're talking about this among 15 other things, right? Where does this stand in the priority?
Right.
So even at Big Fusion, my last company, right? We kind of pioneered GPU virtualization. Okay, we were actually the first guys to actually as a startup to do it. The same question was asked. NVIDIA is doing it. VMware is doing it. How are you going to compete with VMware? Intel could actually do this thing. There's no way, and AWS could do it. Google could do it. Azure could do it. But guess what? Because we were focusing on that small niche of actually doing the GPU virtualization really, 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 really well, we were better than all the other guys.
Nobody could do it better than you
exactly, can. Right? So it's almost like, it's almost like
and that's the bet you're taking
exactly.
here.
We are a guerrilla team. Like we are a small team and we are going to be the best, right? We're going to hunt the space and we're going to be the best IGA, and that's going to be a mission, right? And we'll not be distracted by anything else, at least for the long run.
That's a good. That's a great way to end it for a lot of the entrepreneurs. And, I have a lot of startup founders listening to this here. And we always have this conversation around, you're building what could potentially just be a point feature if the big guys get something right. And the answer always is nobody can do it better than someone who's heavily focused on it. So it does make a lot of sense. Subbu, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. Best of luck with the company. Come back in a year. Let's talk about all the lessons learned in a year, and let's see where you guys
Absolutely, Ryan. Thank you so much. Big fan of what you're doing, and thank you so much for everything you're doing for the community. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you.